You're listening to the Voice of Reason. I'm Dr. Len here with Francesco Garipoli. We've got a really fascinating topic today because a lot of it's because it's frustrating to me and Francesco. We got so many issues here going on that have to do with how we get information out. You know, half the population that we talk to understands a lot of the things that have happened with COVID-19 over the past now 7 months. Gosh, over 7 months. Hard to
Amazing.
believe. Lockdown for 7 months. And the other half of the population doesn't get it. And it doesn't matter how much you talk to them. There's so much fear. They're watching too much TV, too many TV channels. They're not reading the deep stuff that you see on the internet that tells the story of what's happening. That's not what you're going to see on television. So what are we going to do about this, Francesco? I feel frustrated with it, but I'm optimistic that we can do something. How would you approach it?
You know, the most curious thing is the line that is created between the groups of people who believe what they believe is a similar line that fits a lot of attitudes people have. Okay, so when fear is triggered, the people who have a propensity for fear are going to go towards a particular way of thinking and action.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that. So when I go around in the world and I go to the stores, for instance, you know, you're in a big box store, you can see half the people who are bought and sold hook, line, and sinker into everything they hear from the media.
Yeah.
They don't want to know if masks are really helping or not. They just simply want to do what they're told should be done.
Yeah.
And when you see employees at a store, I have to say, I go to a couple of big box stores, you know, and these are people who are getting paid minimum wage. The frustration in these people, these are not college educated people. These are working class people who know intuitively that something is off. Okay. They're not reading what you and I are reading where we know something is off about the data.
Yeah.
They're feeling it and they're sensing it from that animal instinctual mind that they have, which is a powerful survival mind.
Yeah.
They
It's
know
knee-jerk stuff.
it's a knee-jerk stuff. They know this doesn't make sense. They know wearing their mask at work in a Walmart 8 hours a day. Well, actually, they work 6 hours a day, so they don't get benefits. They are feeling it's not helping. It's making things worse.
Yeah. Well, it is. And there's a lot of data to support it. And I haven't found any good data that says anything different. And
No.
it gets frustrating when you've done that and you spend hundreds of hours. It's not like we just read a couple of articles here and there. We spend hundreds and hundreds of hours researching this stuff so that we can become experts in it. Me with a medical background, you with a philosophy background and a pre-med background. I mean, we're doing the best that we can. And trying to convince people is like a waste of time. You have to respect their rights and not tromp on them if they have an opinion that's different than yours. And I found that that's probably the best thing to do, but to continue to educate little by little. Look at the articles. There's so many articles that come out all the time that are from very reliable places that are saying, you're drinking the Kool-Aid if you believe all this stuff that you see on TV. And the TV is all saying the same thing. You know, there are minor differences that are political differences, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, but the basic message is the same. And that's that this is a very serious disease out there, and it's going to kill you if you don't do everything that we tell you.
Right. And sadly, when a good piece of information, like a good interview with a doctor who's researched this, comes out on YouTube, like one you recently sent me, when I went to go look at it, it's been taken down.
Yeah, well,
And
that's right.
This happens often, too often, Len. I mean, when there is, you know, I caught one interview before it was taken down, PhD at a reputable university. He's worked for months to get good information out. If any rational minded person listens to that interview and all the data he cites, you'd never wear a mask.
Yeah, well, that's right.
The video's been taken down.
Yeah.
Now, why shouldn't we have multiple viewpoints? Why do the powers that be at Google and Facebook choose to take down an opposing view to the agenda.
Yeah. They're calling it misinformation. It's misinformation in the viewpoint that they want to present, but it's not news anymore. It's opinions. It's and you
It's
can't
sad, Len.
publish what you want published. I was listening to just a short little brief thing that Dr. Oz was doing tonight.
Mm,
Vicky pointed it out to me. She said, "You got to listen to this." He's talking about the vaccine with a guy that's a real expert in vaccines. He went to the top of the field. I forgot the guy's name, but I
mm.
was impressed with what he was saying. And Dr. Oz was saying, "Well, can we really make a vaccine? And how long do you think it'll take?" And the guy starts answering questions. And it looks like what he's saying is, we probably won't have a vaccine for about a year and a half. And will it be safe? You got to do it on thousands of people, and that's not being done.
Yeah.
And Oz said, "Are you serious? This is really true? What I've been hearing from the people on the news is that it's going to be ready by the end of the year and it's going to be safe? No way."
No
And I
way.
was proud of Oz for saying that,
Well, he was
because he
probably
came right.
surprised. He probably didn't even have time to edit his own thoughts because it was,
Maybe.
you know what I mean? Because it was coming out from that place where it is so unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, the news is if you want to call it the news, the opinions that are on the news that are out there are trying to get us to believe things that are ridiculous. When you think about how this whole thing has progressed right from the start, how could this country, how could the experts and the CDC, the NIH, the World Health Organization, and the FDA all know what was going to happen before we had 50 deaths in this country? They said, brace yourself. There's going to be a huge epidemic here. It'll be a pandemic and millions of people are going to get it. And probably a million or two people are going to die from it too, just in the United States.
And Bill
And
Gates
then,
said that at Johns Hopkins University.
oh yeah,
It's fact. You can look at the video in October of 2019.
oh yeah.
Okay, so something doesn't feel right here,
Well,
especially when we watch these trends and these cycles of deaths fit a particular norm that happens during, we'll call it flu season,
right.
high probability flu season, right?
Yeah,
We see that, and we're seeing that the deaths, even though attributed deaths to COVID sound like they're 3 times higher, 930 to 310 to, per month, to the normal deaths associated to influenza, but we're seeing skewed data.
oh,
And
for
we're,
sure.
and when we're looking at overall deaths, what do you find
There's no difference.
from last year or
Yeah,
the
or
year
the year
before?
before, or 10 years before that. The all-cause mortality in this country is no different this year, 2020, than it has been for the past 10 years.
Yeah. So
And they've got us thinking that the rates are going up, the prevalence is going up, the incidence of diseases is all over the place. What you see on television is people dying in Texas. And then you look at the CDC's reports of how many deaths were there actually in the past week? 303.
Yeah.
Now, something's wrong with that. And if the
And we
all-cause,
don't want a single death. I mean, Lord knows we don't want a single death.
well, that's true.
But the fact is, those 330 deaths are in the norm, in the probability statistics of normal deaths around
That's right.
viral
That's
deaths.
right.
Right?
That's right. You know,
That's
there
the
are
figure.
8,000 deaths a day in this country.
A day.
8,000 because people die. We live our lifespan, we get older, we get a disease, and something happens and we die. And that's 8,000 times a day.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at a few hundred people, and then you see all the hullabaloo that there is about this, it just makes me a little sick to see that they've hoodwinked us. The news is hoodwinking us into thinking things that are not true.
Yeah.
And then they start talking about all the asymptomatic cases of COVID out there. Oh, you're gonna get COVID from somebody who's asymptomatic. And when you really look at that, the World Health Organization came out twice in the last month with statements saying that you don't have to worry about asymptomatic disease causing you to get sick. It's not a problem. And within hours of the first opinion coming out, they took it back. They retracted it. Then within about a day, the second time, which is 3 or 4 days ago, they retracted it again. I think what's happening there, and I'd like to have an answer from somebody that knows, is there are so many false positives when you do the PCR test, which is the standard test to diagnose acute COVID-19 disease. You're going to see a lot of false positives. those are the people who are being diagnosed as having it that are asymptomatic because they don't have it. So what are we talking about here? We should have somebody telling the truth and asking that question and discussing that question, but it's not what you see.
And the sad thing is somebody who is asymptomatic, who has tested positive for COVID and who dies for some
From
other
a heart attack,
reason,
from a heart
of
attack,
a heart attack or of a stroke or of, we'll call
anything.
it old age, or whatever typical things happen that people die of.
Yeah,
Many times this is attributed to COVID,
yeah,
and the numbers go into the COVID-19 death rate.
that's right.
So I see people who are afraid. They say we have to wear masks because we have to prevent millions of people from dying. I've
Right.
heard those numbers. I've heard those names, numbers. I've heard those statements. People believe it. I don't know where they're hearing it because it doesn't fit the facts.
No, it doesn't fit the feeling either. The whole feel of it's wrong. There's something wrong with all this. When you ask people, do you know anybody who died from COVID-19? I hardly ever hear somebody say, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And in fact, I, as a doctor, don't know anybody who has died from COVID-19.
You know, and
So that's got to tell
sadly,
you something.
yeah. And my mom, who passed away at the end of May, 88 years old, 87 years old,
Wow.
with extreme history of respiratory illness.
Mm.
She was tested negative.
Mhm.
She didn't have COVID, and she passed away.
Yeah.
And they at the hospital really wanted to believe she had COVID-19.
Yeah,
She
sure.
didn't. So here's a person who was highly susceptible in the upper percentiles of somebody who could have got it. We had family members around her all the time. It didn't even happen for her. So we've got to really look at this situation when we make our personal choices and when we're told by the government what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
What
right.
happened in California? Vicki, your wife just gave you an update.
They shut it down again. All the things that they opened up are now closed back down again. So we're back down in lockdown. There's a place for being civilly disobedient in a peaceful way. And this may be one of the solutions we have. I'd like to turn this conversation around just a little bit and see how we can be really positive about learning from what's happening and find the right thing to do, the right answers that are peaceful and they're positive, so that people can buy into it in a way where we're not just listening to people who are complaining about stuff, even though the stuff that we're saying is so right and so accurate. And it's well documented in the literature if you read that. So I'm inclined to look at this as an opportunity. We've talked about this before, of being able to see what we can make of this. What are we going to learn from it? How are we going to take care of ourselves? How are we going to stick together? How are we going to build community so that we're supporting one another in a positive way? How do we take care of each other?
Yeah.
Rather than being divided and unable to really connect because of the isolation and the fear and the terror. You know, when I walk into a store like Whole Foods, if I haven't got my mask on, I'll be barbecued in about 10 minutes because people, they're so scared. I have so much compassion for them, what they're going through, because they're terrorized. These are good people.
They're good people who have a tendency to be fear-oriented.
And
so
careful.
All they need is a little something to push them and it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't wear a mask. I know it's terrible.
I don't either.
I can't do it. I'm an absolutely healthy person. I am very conscious of space between people.
Yeah,
I won't go up too close to a person. I'll stay within 2 meters from them.
Yeah, I will
just
too.
to honor that part.
Right.
But wearing a mask isn't going to, from any facts, from any data we have seen from lots of good studies,
That's right.
actually.
Well, you watch people who are wearing a mask. Half the time their nose is sticking out, right? And what's that doing? Nothing. And they say use a scarf or use something cloth. You think a virus isn't going to go through that? And it's airborne. We know that. So there's a real issue there.
Yeah, the mask thing can be taken apart a million times over. And
Yeah.
so much good research has been not done just during COVID, because people think, oh, this is a rebellious thought.
Yeah, with
There is
influenza.
mask research that goes back 10 years,
Oh, more than that. Yeah.
more than that. So good data about masks and airborne respiratory type diseases has been around forever.
Yeah. And you can go a level deeper with this too. I mean, I don't wear a mask because I want to set the example of not being willing to accept my civil liberties being withdrawn. You know,
Right.
I belong to a club that's like a tennis club. It's called pickleball, and we've got 500 members. And
Wow.
this and the city, 8 courts, and the city comes out and they're monitoring what we're doing, and they're saying you have to wear a mask or we're going to shut you down. And my position is, I'm not going to wear a mask, and if you want to find me and cite me for this misdemeanor, fine, you do that. But I have to make a statement that says I'm not going along with that. And some of the feedback I got from the people who are members of the club was mixed. A lot of them said, I feel just like you, but I don't have the guts to say what you just said. And I know you're right. The stuff that you're talking about is right. You provided me with literature to look over, and I've read it, and it's right. And there's another group of people that they just want to play pickleball. And
Right.
they say, can't you just do that for us? And my answer was, no, I cannot do that for you. I'm not going to give up my civil rights for pickleball. And so what I decided to do was honor them by saying, okay, I'll withdraw from playing pickleball, but I'm not coming there to wear a mask. So I'm not going to play until this thing is done or until you invite me back. And now everybody's happy. But the point is that we got the message out that we have to be disobedient to those mandates that are made in a civil way that isn't aggressive. We don't have to start a war over it. We don't have to do what a lot of the black marches are doing now, that are turning out to be violent. And I don't blame the people who are doing the marches, but that's what happens. It seems like about every other time.
But it's
So
all it's all dividing people. It's also divisive.
it is.
And we're even the mask story is dividing people. If people could simply say, I want to wear a mask, it's my choice.
Yeah, wear a
Beautiful.
mask. Yeah.
And I don't, but I will respect the space.
Yes, that's
Let's
what I told them.
leave it be. But there are people that are so convinced that you not wearing a mask are contributing to the problem.
Right.
And then you look at the data again, and there is no problem.
Yeah.
So where is the drive to create the separation? And
Yeah.
this is the big issue.
Yeah. Well, there are forces that want to divide us, and I'm convinced that it looks like the government's stupid, and the people behind it that are making the policies, but they're not stupid. They're smart. They've outguessed us. They put a candle under our tails, and we hop around to get out of the heat, and we buy into what they're saying. The fear becomes something that you buy into. But if you're an expert in this, as I am, and you are, and you know the information, then it becomes, how are you going to have a compassionate view for those people who are making it tough, who are not standing up for their rights as an American citizen and making sure that we don't have things taken away from us, like the freedom of the press or the freedom of speech, or you can't publish stuff or it's going to be separated, or where they're talking about unrealistic things like a vaccine in 6 months, which is going to be a very dangerous thing because of the way the laws of this country are designed. The drug companies can make what they want, and they can't be prosecuted. If they kill somebody or they have some problem that's autistic or whatever that they might get from a vaccine, they are free and clear of it since 1986 when that law was passed. We can't have that. And we can't have something come out in 6 or 9 months as the CDC and the NIH are trying to tell us. And then you look behind it and see some of the finances that are involved there. There are conflicts of interest that are huge. And how do we do that? I think the kindness that we can have for people who don't get this because they're not trained, and it takes too much time to try and understand. And even if they do, they're not going to get it right, particularly when they're being brainwashed by both sides, the right side and the side that's not right.
Yeah.
So I'm compassionate with my patients. If they want me to wear a mask, I'll wear a mask. Not that in my office, because they're coming to see me and they want to feel safe. But it's a hard pill to swallow. I think too many of us have swallowed the blue pill.
Yeah. It's a complex situation. People are driven by their innate fears, and when something like this comes up, it
Yeah.
gets triggered.
Yeah. You don't
And
want to take a chance.
yeah, and I always ask people to really look at how you're reacting to this situation
Yeah.
and take a step back and take a breath and ask yourself, does it feel right?
Yeah.
Does it feel right to me?
That's so good.
But it's very hard to be self-reflective when you're overwhelmed with information, but you
Or you're
have to
trying to
shut.
protect your family too. You know, you don't
Yeah,
know the answer.
exactly.
You don't want your
How many?
kids or your husband or or wife to get sick and or die from something that you could have prevented. You'd
I
feel
know
terrible.
it's true, but I saw a family today in a store. It was fascinating. Mother in maybe young, late 30s, mother, father wearing a mask, two kids wearing a mask, and one girl around 11 not wearing a mask in the family. And
Yeah.
I didn't have to even talk to them about it, but
Yeah.
that girl, you can see she was in her power. She wasn't going to wear a mask. No one's going to tell her to wear a mask,
Yeah.
but she was part of the family.
Yeah.
It
She's
was
listening to her intuition.
it was very cute to see.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to come to, is to say, I feel strong enough in myself that I know I'm healthy, I'm going to respect people's space,
Yeah.
but wearing a mask does not feel right.
Well, wearing
And
a mask for somebody who's healthy. I mean, when has that ever been done before? What's the
no,
point of that?
doesn't make sense.
That's a recent trend that's
But
happened in the last few years with SARS and with MERS and with influenza in some countries. But it's not the way to go. It's
no,
because, as you said, the data's not there. And in the past, what we've done is we isolated the people who are sick. The people that had bubonic plague, we isolated them. We didn't isolate the people who were healthy. And that's what we're doing. Just that little piece of common sense would tell you that does sound a little odd.
it does. And it's metaphoric. The mask in many ways is a metaphor.
Sure.
And you've got to look at what that metaphor means to you and
Yeah,
what that is
that's,
triggering in you.
you're right.
And if more people could be courageous, and be respectful. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not telling people to be rebellious or to do something stupid. We're
No,
just saying go
do it
inside,
peacefully.
because when your intuition is kicked in, when you are coming from that intelligent place in your heart,
Yeah.
you'll make better decisions than if you just follow the bouncing ball and
Well, that's right.
maybe be led down the garden path.
Yeah. Well, we don't train people to think for themselves. We train them to believe the things we want them to believe. And so it comes from information from the outside
Yeah,
rather than what you know in your heart that you intuit on the inside. When it comes from the inside, you own it. When it's from the outside, it's legislated to you. And
exactly.
legislation doesn't work anywhere near as inspiration does. So it's
It's
about having inspiration, confidence, trust, and faith in yourself and in your community. That's probably where the answer is.
And it's true. That's beautiful, Len. And when people understand that when they give their power away to someone else or some other system or government, they're also giving the power of their immune system away. And
That's
right
so
now,
true. So
during this situation, you need your immune system in top shape.
it's being destroyed
It's being destroyed.
by the
And people,
fear
yeah,
uh, and and the separation, the isolation, uh, the tactics that are being put out by the government to convince you that you're in real trouble, and now the lockdown again. You know, there are some counties in California that have refused to obey the lockdowns,
really.
and the police have not been prosecuting them. The sheriff's department has not been
They
prosecuting.
can't. They can't. They would be ripped apart in lawsuits.
Yeah, well, that too. I
Yeah.
think that the idea of peaceful civil disobedience is probably the right way to go, and done in a way that's positive, not a way to start an argument or to fight with somebody. It's just saying, no, I'm not going to do that because it's not right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're getting corralled, and now the ante's going up. And the reason for it is totally a mystery from the point of view of logic, because when you have a lot of cases of COVID-19, you should be delighted, because that's how you're going to, if people are not dying from it, and the death rates are down, because that's how you're going to build herd immunity from it. That's what's going to make the disease go away. It's the same thing with kids going to school. We got to let kids go to school. I love my kids too, and my grandkids. I don't want to see them getting COVID-19 and being terribly sick or dying. But we have to face this like it's a war in some ways, even though I hate using that word, because wars don't usually solve anything. But what's happening is we're getting destroyed economically and individually and as a culture. And that has to be changed. And the way that will change is only if we stand up for ourselves and do that the way a good American should do. We've got to save America. And this is how you save America, because we're going down the tubes fast.
We will if we don't follow that core drive that makes this country and every country great. It's when people have a pride in their country and pride in their leaders and pride in the decisions made as a group, as a country. Right. A country is a big community.
Yeah, sure is.
Here in this state where I'm in, North Carolina, the license plates say "Freedom First."
Oh, I love it.
They're very proud to have the first volunteer militia that went into battle to fight in the Civil War.
Wow.
Free slaves.
Wow.
Very interesting, the state. When this COVID came out, COVID-19, they said, we're going to keep freedom first. Yeah. It's on our license plate. It's in our spirit.
That's great.
It's amazing, the people of this state. And right through now, 6-7 months into this, you still see people going into stores. If you wear a mask, you want to wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, you don't. Yeah. Only a few places it's mandatory.
Yeah.
And it's a tough one, especially when one week it's mandatory, next week it isn't.
Yeah.
So that's making a lot of very we'll call it working class people, regular day-to-day people, very confused.
Right. Well, my son was telling me he was up in Tahoe. He just went there last night. He said, we went out to dinner. No one was wearing a mask. Everybody was gathering around. Nobody was sick. He went to Shasta a few weeks ago, Mount Shasta, same thing. So there are lots of areas in California where people are just saying no to the governor and saying, we're not going to tolerate that. You want to come and get us? You better talk to the sheriff's department first, because they're not going to do it. Anyway, you're listening to The Voice of Reason. I'm Dr. Len here with Francesco Garipoli. I hope you'll go to our website sometime. We've got over 50 shows now, more than that, on this COVID-19. They're all short and right to the point, maybe between 5 and 20 minutes. And if you want an education on that, we put a lot of time into it. It's a free website. All you got to do is go to drsaputo.com. Give us your email address so we can keep the spammers from coming to get us. You won't have to pay a penny, and you'll get good information.
And if you disagree, we want to hear
let us know.
We invite people onto the show if they want to, or at least your questions. So please know we have no agenda, right, Len? I mean, you and I have never had an agenda. All we want, the idea of the Voice of Reason, which is such a great name, is we're trying to find some common place based on good information, facts, and common sense.
Absolutely. That's right. Well, tune in again. We'll be back on Thursday night. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.